Soccer, the world's most popular sport. Played by hundreds of millions of people worldwide across almost every country, it is a language that connects the cultures of all who play. For most people, soccer is the dominant sport of the country in which they live. Kids grow up playing soccer every day in the street. No matter how little you have or how poor your family is, if you have something to kick, you can play soccer. But in America, soccer has always taken a backseat as more popular sports dominate interest. Most Americans watch football, baseball, or basketball, while maybe watching a game or two of the World Cup every 4 years. This comparable lack of interest has led to an American soccer program which has been far behind the majority of other countries. Why then has the United States, a country on the global forefront of almost every field, failed to produce a competitive soccer program? To answer the question regarding modern-day soccer institutions in America, it is first necessary to analyze the history of the game in the United States. The first recorded instance of a sport resembling soccer in North America likely occurred long before any European settlers arrived. Native Americans would play a game called Passaquaquahawk, which means they gathered to play ball with foot. Passaquaquahawk was a violent game, oftentimes resembling war more than sport. It was played on a field spanning several thousand feet and contained hundreds of players. Hundreds of years later, in 1862, Garrett Miller established the country's first organized soccer team, the Oneida Football Club. Consisting of students from the Boston area, the Oneida Football Club enjoyed periods of great success, purportedly never losing the game. Following the successes of the Oneida Football Club, universities soon began to take interest in soccer as well. The first ever intercollegiate soccer match took place on November 6, 1876, between Rutgers College and the College of New Jersey, now Rutgers University and Princeton University respectively. The game was much more similar to modern-day rugby than modern-day soccer. Rutgers emerged victorious with a score of 6-4. During this time, as the Industrial Revolution in America drew to a close, immigrants were arriving in metropolitan areas at great rates. These worker communities, which consisted of large numbers of people from the British Isles, often had accompanying soccer teams. As interest for soccer grew on both an organized and unorganized level throughout the United States, it became apparent that there was a need for a governing body of soccer. In 1884, the American Football Association was born. As the American economy soared in the late 19th and early 20th century, so did the growth of soccer. Factory owners invested in soccer teams consisting of their immigrant workers who had a passion for the game. Strong players from overseas were attracted by the promise of better wages. Interstate tournaments were organized, and college campuses were hotbeds for soccer. The golden age of American soccer had begun. But soon, conflicts would arise which would halt the sport's progress. A competing governing body of soccer, the American Amateur Football Association, arose. This body soon became the United States Football Association, which was endorsed by the International Federation of Association Football, or FIFA. The competition between the AFA and the USFA to become the primary soccer organization in America would become known as the Soccer Wars. Their failure to collaborate would undoubtedly hurt soccer's growth, but an even greater setback was on its way: the Great Depression. With factory owners no longer willing to invest in teams, and fans no longer able to purchase tickets to games, interest in soccer was quickly fading away. By the end of the Great Depression, the American Soccer League, the USFA's first attempt at a professional soccer league, had collapsed. Thus ended the golden age of American soccer. Soccer was no longer on the forefront of American sports during the mid-20th century, but it would have another moment in the spotlight, even if only briefly. In 1950, the fourth FIFA World Cup took place in Brazil. The United States national team, which consisted of mainly part-time players, was placed in a group with Spain, Chile, and England. England were known as the kings of football at the time, and they had enjoyed lengthy periods of great success. On the other hand, the United States were winless in their last 7 matches. The odds for England to win the entire tournament were 3 to 1. The United States had odds of 500 to 1. No one expected anything other than a comfortable win for the English. The match began, and the United States immediately felt the pressure of a more skilled side. It seemed as if it were only a matter of time until the United States' resistance was broken. However, just before halftime, the United States made a rare foray into England's half. A long diagonal pass was launched hopefully towards the goal, and suddenly, United States forward Joe Gaetjens had managed to ever so slightly redirect the ball past the English goalkeeper. It all happened so fast, no one had quite realized what had occurred until the ball was in the back of the net. Miraculously, the United States managed to hold on to this 1-0 result and conquer the giants of world football. Around the world, the scoreline was reported excitedly. Ironically, the United States and England covered the game probably the least. Unfortunately for the United States team, they could not translate their victory into further momentum, and they lost the following 2 games of the tournament. Despite their improbable win over the English, interest for soccer in the United States still remained somewhat low. However, the United States' performance in the 1950 World Cup did contribute to the process by which the United States hosted the 1996 World Cup, an event which did spark a significant renewal in the growth of soccer in the United States. The United States produces some of the best athletes in the world. No other country can compete with the United States' impressive roster of basketball or football stars. Why then can the United States not produce any soccer players which stand out on the world stage? One reason is that the United States' best athletes all choose to play other sports. Odell Beckham Jr., Steve Nash, Chad Ochocinco, all of these athletes had aspirations in soccer at some point in their career. What made them pick basketball and football instead? The reason is the same one that drives all business decisions: money. Major League Soccer, the first division of professional soccer in the United States, suffers from an enormous wage gap. In 2014, the salaries of the highest paid 7 players in the league accounted for over 31% of the total salaries of all MLS players. The average salary for an MLS athlete was approximately $200,000 in 2014, although over 3/4 of MLS players made less than that. Comparatively, Steve Nash made over $9 million in a year in 2014. It is clear to see why athletes are not keen to choose soccer as a career. However, looking back, why is this the case? What happened historically to lead to this disparity? When the game of soccer was first being adopted at the collegiate level, it did not look very much like the game of soccer today. The first soccer match between Rutgers and Princeton was in actuality a sport that drew from the aspects of soccer, football, and rugby, although the sport did not have defined enough rules to be called any one sport in particular. As time passed and the rules became more and more defined, this sport slowly changed into something that functioned much more closely to modern-day football than soccer. Perhaps the college institutions wanted their sport to be original, free from the influence of England's version of the game. Perhaps the student athletes appreciated the more physical aspect of the game. Whatever the reasons were, this new football-like sport dominated college campuses. Once the American youth had chosen football as their game of choice, it was inevitable that soccer would remain perpetually less popular. With less people watching, marketing opportunities were lower. As with any business, the more profitable will receive more attention, and through this model, football's popularity soared as soccer stagnated. Today, soccer has fallen into an unfortunate cycle. It is not profitable because people do not watch it. People do not watch it because the strongest athletes compete in other sports, and the strongest athletes compete in other sports because soccer is not profitable. Almost exclusively, the only MLS athletes with salaries that can compete with other American sports salaries are the athletes who have already established themselves in foreign leagues. Perhaps if the wage gap in the MLS was decreased and the average MLS athlete made more money, the league could take the first steps towards being a legitimate option for more athletes. The history of soccer in the United States is a complex one. It is the history of Native Americans, immigrants, part-time athletes, and college students, but above all, It is a history of people who share a common passion, the game of soccer. There have been many different ages of soccer in the United States, and it is hard to tell exactly where it is headed next. But as long as there are people with a passion for the game, soccer will always have a place in the United States.